Pinball, 1973, is a semi-autobiographical novella by Haruki Murakami. And in that
very Murakami way,
it's about a guy who reminisces about a time in his life when he played a lot of pinball. And there is also another guy whose connection with the first guy is pinball. And beyond that, I don't know how the two are connected.
And
that first guy is sleeping with twins. It's also set in 1973. And as you can probably already tell, it's a very Murakami book, isn't it? But maybe just not Murakami enough for me. And I say that as a fan because, look, I found with Murakami, the stories don't always make sense on the narrative level. Weird characters doing their own weird things in their own weird world. But the stories always make sense on an emotional or like psychological level, in spite of fish falling from the skies or like wells appearing in offices. Strangely though, but probably because this is one of Murakami's first books, there are none of those absurd fantasy elements in this book. This is a no-spoiler review of Haruki Murakami's Pinball, 1973.
Subscribe, like, share, subscribe button.
So, who is Murakami? For all of you sub-rock dwellers, he is a Japanese novelist, essayist, short story, serial bestseller, millions of copies sold inside of Japan, outside of Japan, stuff like Norwegian Wood, Kafka on the Shore, 1Q84. By the Japanese literary world, he's always considered an outsider. In his own words, he considers himself a black sheep. He's accused of being non-Japanese by the Japanese. And more recently, his work is polarizing literary critics, both Japanese and non-Japanese. And it's also, his work is polarizing the general reading public as well,
because
they think he might be a little bit, Google it. But yeah, even though Murakami's books can be a little bit, what the fuck? On a narrative level, I've always found closure in them. Like I said, they make sense on an emotional level. And going over a few of his interviews, Murakami is definitely a very intuitive and gut-driven writer. And as such, there's a lot of him psychologically in his books. Pinball 1973 though, maybe a lot more of him and not much closure.
For me anyway.
His prose, as ever, Murakami's prose is, in and of itself, it's beautiful. It's captivating. And this novella, like reading it was enjoyable. There were all the usual Murakami bits, like funny bits, strange bits, non-sequitory bits, tangentially bits, all the usual Murakami stuff. But, actually what's interesting is all the Murakami stuff was already there because this was one of his first books. So in that sense, knowing that it was one of his first books, going into it was all that more interesting. Wow, this is where the guy started. But, and it's a big but, Pinball 1973 didn't feel that well put together. Like the friend who recommended it calls it raw, and I definitely know what she means. Overall, I was just left with like a,
okay, don't know if I got it though.
So I've got the vintage edition of the book somewhere, and it features a great intro by Murakami himself. And it's about him just telling us how he got into writing. And in terms of an origin story, it is about as Murakami as you can get. And he also goes into his writing process at the time, which is also hilariously, laboriously Murakami. And Pinball 1973 was the second thing he ever wrote, and it's part of his coffee table novels, because he wrote them at a coffee table. Reading that intro, though, really refreshed my appreciation for Murakami. He's just such a unique and authentic voice. Like, he just writes. I want to say fearlessly. It's as though nothing will stop him from writing what he wants to write. No review, no critiques, whatever will stop him. He just writes, regardless. Which is precisely the impression I got of Pinball 1973. He just wrote it. And, very Murakami, he then just wrote the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And thinking about it, that's really inspiring, just to be able to write like that as he does.
Bye, subscribe, love it.